Mike Griffith joins us now. Mike Griffith with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Mike, how are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great, Dave. I actually drove back to Athens last night after Coach Heupel's brief but informative press conference. It sounds like Tennessee's got a healthy quarterback raring to go.
I guess. We were just talking about that. What he said that, but he's kind of played games before with Cooper Mays last year and didn't play at Florida. And then he kind of played games with Lance Hurd, didn't play at Arkansas this year. I'm sorry, Oklahoma this year. How do you come away from that? Because I came away scratching my head a little bit more whether or not he'll play. I think he will. I'm 80% that he'll play, but I was definitely not 100% sure. What about you?
I don't think Josh Heupel would mislead us. I mean, I think he's a straight shooter. I mean,
come on.
That I don't.
Come on. Cooper Mays was definitely going to play against Florida last year.
And you don't know if that was Heupel or Mays. I mean, Cade Mays here, there were times, listen, I'm not going to get too far into the weeds, but look, we got a great matchup. I'm looking at these teams. I'm looking at common opponents, who has the best win, who has the worst loss. Statistically, certainly Tennessee looks really good defensively. I mean, these are John Chavis-like numbers when you look at, top 10 rankings in all these categories. You got one of the best running backs in the country right now. I mean, the thing that impresses me most is, the whole Josh Heupel thing. When he was first hired, to flashback, there were a lot of critics and said, oh, he runs some gimmicky out. Listen, there's nothing gimmicky about this. These guys are going to punch in the mouth, and these guys play defense, and these guys are sound on offense. They can pound the ball. He's got a really talented quarterback. He does a great job protecting him with the run game and with the great defense where, as long as Nico doesn't make bad, decisions, I mean, this is a legit top 5 playoff team right now. I mean, Tennessee is leading the SEC. Now, Dave, if you wanted to be a critic and say that the SEC schedule makers set this all up, having 8 teams with 2 losses or less, if you wanted to suggest that maybe they did that for higher ratings and to get more fans engaged, to make more money, you could suggest that. There's people at Georgia that wonder a little bit about playing Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss on the road. They wonder how that schedule came about, why it came about. I mean, this is Georgia's first home game in 5 weeks. I didn't make out the schedule, but there's people that wonder if maybe people would manipulate the schedule to make more money. They wonder if maybe the Big Ten does. I don't know. Has Penn State beat a ranked opponent yet? I don't think so. I don't know. Who's Texas? What's their best win? Vanderbilt? I'm just saying scheduling has something to do with it, but here nor there, as I compare Georgia and Tennessee's schedule and common opponents, pretty even. Tennessee beats Florida at home in overtime. Georgia gets them on the road, Jacksonville. They call that a neutral site. It's like 300 miles from here and 60 miles from Gainesville, but whatever. Neutral crowd. But if Lagway doesn't go down, how does it come out? And that was a close game in the fourth quarter. So, Tennessee beats Alabama at home by a touchdown. Georgia loses to Alabama on the road by a touchdown. It's really interesting to see Mississippi State. That'd have been a runaway laughter if Coach Heupel hadn't rested Nico as a precaution in the second half, right? So I was surprised he left the running back in there, though, after he hurt his ankle. It seems to me he'd want to rest that guy. But he's a workhorse, and he's got a record within reach, so I guess I understand that. But pretty even as I look at these teams' common opponents.
No, and I texted you, I think it was after the Alabama game, and I know Carson Beck almost led them back, but I just thought there were a lot of instances where his arm strength was lacking, and I was curious if something was wrong with his arm. But just in general, what do you think of Beck's performance? Because, man, he's turning it over like a 57 Chevy.
Yeah, well, I got asked a question. We're at the point in Georgia, and you've been here before, where now the media is getting mad at each other. That's when you know that things are getting pretty serious, when the media so I did this Atlanta radio station show this morning, and the host totally set me up. You couldn't have done it any better, Dave, and you're one of the best at this. You'll appreciate this. So not only do they play the Kirby clip, but they play the question too now, right? So the question is there any thought to replacing Carson Beck? And I'm not thinking about who asked the question. And the question is, am I more surprised by the answer or the question? Well, Georgia doesn't have a backup quarterback. I mean, this Gunnar Stockton guy, he may be in a high school Hall of Fame, and that he'll sell a lot of cars someday. But this kid ain't in Carson's class. Carson has NFL talent, right? And I said I'm a lot more surprised by the question because we all know the answer. Kirby's not going to bail on Carson Beck. I mean, Carson didn't play that bad in the last game. Now, if you want to look at the last 6 games, you're talking to 12 picks, 13 sacks, 4 fumbles. You could conclude, in conclusivity, you could look at that and say, boy, he's really struggling. But if you look at what he did on the road against the best front 7 in college football, look these guys up. It's ridiculous, this free agent class. And it's not just last year's with Walter Nolan and Princely, I can't pronounce his last name, from Florida. They got some guys from Tech. They got some guys from Auburn and they've been in the program a few years. They got one guy they actually recruited who leads them in sacks. I think all but 4 of their starters are transfers right now. On the road, in the rain, missing your best offensive lineman, your best running back's banged up, your 2 best receivers aren't playing right now, and you're playing an Ole Miss team that just set a school record for 63 points in SEC. Not much margin for error. Carson's interception came in the 4th quarter on a tip pass on a 4th down play, right? He had his ex-receiver drop a ball that hit him in the numbers. He had the Stanford tight end that hit him in the numbers, dropped the ball. He got blindsided and fumbled, had a freshman tailback fumble. You just can't put all that on a quarterback. So I said, and the reporter was upset, and look, I understand why we sometimes in the media, we're in a tough spot because we have to ask questions that we already know the answer to, but we need the coach to say that. Right. So people,
sure.
what a stupid question. No, it's just we need the coach to make that statement that he's not changing quarterbacks because there are some people out there on social media that I don't know if it's a slow day and the View or whatever, and they decide to follow college football, but they really aren't as dialed in as a typical SEC fan would be. And they start going, well, you got to change the quarterback. That's where it all starts, right? Low hanging fruit. It's not Carson Beck. It's the same guy that played there last year. He just doesn't have the number 2 tight end in fantasy football, Brock Bowers, or the number 20 receiver in fantasy football, Ladd McConkey, anymore to throw to. He's got some guys that transfers that didn't work out, and some guys that came back that weren't good enough to start before, and frankly, probably aren't good enough to be starting now. But they're the best option because the guys that were 2s and 3s before have transferred off to Syracuse or wherever. Because when you're a 2 or a 3 now, you don't wait your turn. You go somewhere else to be the 1 and make a lot of money. And we saw that bite Georgia last year. If Adonai Mitchell sticks around, Kirby's talking about 3 straight national titles. But instead, he goes to Texas and helps Texas beat Alabama and get Texas in the playoffs. So it's a different game now. And Georgia is just as affected as anyone else because those 2s and 3s that used to be ready to step up, they're not there anymore. Now you got the freshmen that you're trying to coach up on the bottom of the roster. So that's kind of in a nutshell where George is at. And Carson's not the kind of, he's not, obviously, he's not Jalen Milroe. He can't put the team on his shoulders and run for 190 yards. He's not that kind of quarterback. He's very dependent on his talent. I mean, you look at Peyton Manning's first year in the NFL. He didn't look like that by the time he was done playing, or Steve Young with the Tampa Bay Bucks is a nobody, and he goes to the 49ers, a Hall of Famer. So I think a lot of this has to do with the supporting cast of Georgia, the attrition, and the schedule. Not much margin for error.
So, Mike, taking all this into account, does Georgia have the makeup? Because I've talked a lot about the discipline issues facing Georgia this season and in previous seasons with Kirby Smart. And I'm not saying Kirby Smart's not trying to nip it in the bud. He seems a lot more serious about trying to stop it than Urban Meyer did. I'll put it that way. But has that created a cultural issue to where? Do you feel this team has the mental makeup to be able to come out on Saturday and say our backs are against the wall, we have to win this game or else we're screwed? Or do you think that it could all collapse on them because of the discipline issues?
Well, I think those are interesting questions. I don't know that I would put Georgia's disciplinary issues in the same category as Florida's.
Oh, they're not the same. I agree.
Yeah.
How about Tennessee early 2000s?
Well, I don't even think Tennessee's were that bad. I think the Florida media did a great job of trolling Philip Fulmer, naming it the Fulmer Cup when their house was on fire and a lot of other people bet on it because back then everybody.
But with all fairness, After a sexual assault charge, Philip Fulmer met with a potential victim at a Shoney's on a Sunday morning. That wasn't good.
Well, I'm not talking about management. We're talking about level of discipline issues here. And I mean, if we want to comb through all the collegiate programs and find out how many players but when as Philip Fulmer would say, what we're seeing though, Caleb, is Philip Fulmer, the first ballot Hall of Famer, once said, the wind blows the hardest at the top of the flagpole. And that's where Georgia's at when you've won 2 back-to-back titles. I mean, Lane Kiffin saying, we got guys that came back for another year just to beat Georgia. We got guys that transferred and said they picked us because they wanted to beat Georgia. You're everybody's extra scout. I'll never forget in 1997, back when there was access, and I knocked on Mike Dubos's door unannounced and walked into his office.
And there was the secretary.
And he actually spent about 20 minutes talking to me. There was a stack of the VHS tapes on the desk, right? And there was like 2, 2, 2, 2, 9. And I said, why you got 9 tapes of Tennessee? He goes, did you see Jamal Lewis last year? I said, yeah. He goes, we got to win that game. They had 9 tapes of Tennessee. That was the team to beat. Philip Fulmer's Tennessee Vols was the team that you circled the wagons for. You spent the whole offseason studying, trying to figure out how you were going to beat those Tennessee Vols. That's where Tennessee football was. That's what Georgia is. And everybody's scheme and game planning, and it's everybody's game of the year. And they've taken a lot of punches, Dave, from a lot of really good teams.
Let me ask you this question. Mike Griffith, nice enough to join us from Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And I know you're focused on your team, so you probably haven't seen every snap of the past 4 quarters that Nico's played, which I think he's played at a really high level. Would you take Nico or Carson Beck to lead your team on Saturday based off what you've seen? And I know you know Beck probably a little bit better.
It's interesting. I think it would actually be to the benefit of both teams to trade quarterbacks because Carson's a great game manager who gets through his progressions and really doesn't make mistakes. And right now, Georgia could really use a playmaker at quarterback like Nico that could do some things with his legs. So I think it has to do with what you're running and what you have as a supporting cast. And right now, Georgia could really use a mobile playmaker like Nico. And really, I think a lot of Tennessee – I don't want to speak for Tennessee fans, but from what I've seen of Tennessee, if Nico makes good decisions, they're pretty darn unbeatable. But when he makes bad decisions, they get beatable. But again, the guy's only a freshman, so keep that in mind. I mean, you're going to have a different version of this guy the next 2 years. I mean, this guy's he's going to start out next year among the top 5 Heisman Trophy candidates. And really, if Tennessee wins this game and wins out and beats Vanderbilt on the road to end the year and makes the playoff or plays in the SEC championship game, no one says that Nico couldn't finish in the top 10 for the Heisman this year if he finishes very strong and wins these high profile. Who would have ever thought Tennessee and Vanderbilt would be a high profile game? But here we are. If he wins these high profile games, particularly this one with game day and SEC Nation, takes down Georgia, takes down Vanderbilt on the road because, they're going to be crowing in Nashville, and then goes to the SEC championship game and beats a Texas or beats Alabama in a rematch or an A&M. I don't know, whoever your projection is out of those 8 teams that are still somehow in the running. I think the guy's fantastic. But Carson Beck came into this year as a projected number 1 and came in as the Heisman Trophy favorite for a reason. Because when he had a good supporting cast, he was pretty close to unbeatable last year. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. I mean, these last 6 games are somewhat of an outlier. When you consider his first 17, he never had more than 1 pick in any of those games. So a lot of this, I think, is circumstantial. Now, the question is, has this affected him? Has this gotten into his head? We have seen frustration. What's it like in the locker room? Is there any finger pointing? How are the receivers and him getting along? How much has the game plan been altered? How much can Tennessee affect the rush? Are they as good as Ole Miss? The numbers wouldn't suggest that. But then again, Ole Miss played a cupcake 4-game preseason schedule. So there's a lot in the balance here that remains to play out.
So,
Mike, I know that I know you probably have to run, but I did want to work this in because I know you, and I have an idea of kind of the angle you were going for when I heard your question at the press conference yesterday. And you talked about Nico, and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I misquoted here at all. But you were asking about Nico handling NIL money,
Right.
as kind of compared to Carson Beck. And I think what you were driving at, correct me if I'm wrong, is that from all indications I've gotten on and off the record, Nico is a great leader. I don't care if he has 50 million in the bank.
Sure.
But it seems like you're wondering, maybe aloud, correct me if I'm wrong, that Carson Beck is perhaps not that leader now that he's gotten paid and he's showing off pictures of his Lamborghini.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, Carson set himself up for a lot of this. I mean, he got a tattoo on his leg that says "Sky's the limit" and showed it off at media days. I mean, he advertised himself as a guy that wanted to embrace all the pressure that comes with NIL riches. You know, he put the pictures. I mean, the media is not stalking this guy. When you're putting pictures, and he's got 2 social media accounts, one public and one private, of yourself on a private jet on the golf course with a steak in front of you, an expensive Dave Hooker watch on your wrist. When you're putting those things out there, you're telling the Louis Vuitton bags and the dog walk to the game. You're making a statement, and you're telling everybody, hey, I am this dude. And you're kind of setting yourself up. If things don't work out, it's not going to look good. So I do think there's a cautionary. And in Nico's, I mean, he had to keep it quiet for a while. I mean, didn't the Tennessee government kind of rally behind him and change?
Yeah, because technically it was against the rules.
At that time it was. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you everybody wasn't doing. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that wasn't happening anywhere, right? What did Rick Barnes say? NIL stands for now it's legal. Yeah. Right. I think he said that at the quarterback lunch, and I keep up a little bit. I got some family up there, Dave. So I keep up with the Vols. I keep up with all the SEC. Actually, I do. I've only gone to about half the Georgia games. Most of the time I'm sitting in Command Central trying to write about whatever, Alabama getting beat by Vanderbilt. Boy, was that ever amazing. I guess Jalen's agent told him he didn't have to run that game. But when he runs, can anybody beat him? I mean, because let me tell you, this SEC is so wide open, Dave. But this game, it's so exciting. It reminds me of 2 years ago when Tennessee came down here #1 in the college football playoff rankings. And, the stage was set for this epic battle. And I think that the Georgia fans might have been challenged that the crowd wasn't going to be loud, or it wasn't a loud crowd or something like that. And they got all fired up for that game, and the rain came, and almost like an answer. And Jalen Carter decided to cash in on that day. That was a great why in the world are you showing my airborne picture, Dave?
Oh, I didn't know that it was going to go right up. I was going to save it for later, but you look awesome, man. It was Veterans Day yesterday. I was going to tell you we appreciate your service, but we redid the software and all the buttons are different yesterday. So I didn't mean to just pop it up. I was going to say thank you for your service.
I would be disappointed if you had not pulled something. I really would have. I mean,
look at that young Mike Griffith there, man.
Yeah, that's
if I was like a 20-year-old lady, I'd be like, that's my guy.
That's 18 and a half years old, 6 months after high school graduation, with a rifle in my hand, ready to do what this country needed.
Thank God you didn't have a rifle in your hand when you and I worked together. I'd be a dead man.
Oh, geez.
Mike, I got an honest question for you, and I know this is blasphemous because Kirby Smart has 2 national titles. But if things get close and it comes down to wits of like coaching in-game management decisions, who do you have more faith in, Josh Heupel or Kirby Smart, to not make a mistake and panic in the moment?
Well, honestly, I don't think either one of these coaches would panic. I mean, you're talking about, 2 jet fighter pilots here. I mean, these are 2 great coaches. It's going to come down to whose kids execute and who's had their kids better prepared for the moment. I mean, say this for Tennessee, they've got a lot of momentum right now. They've won 4 in a row. Well, they were at home for 4 games. Georgia's been on the road 5 weeks in a row. They're coming off a really bad loss. Tennessee's got confidence. The kids they brought out there yesterday, I'm sure they just grabbed whoever and put them behind the microphone, but they were very comfortable and confident, and they seem to understand. But, so you give Tennessee the momentum. Georgia's played in a lot of games like this. There is something to be said for that. Georgia does have a home crowd. I mean, I think Josh got a pretty good road win earlier this year. I'm trying to see, where did they win at? Not Arkansas.
It was Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. That's a big win.
Yeah.
You went on the road at Oklahoma. That's a good win on the road. So they've kind of taken that monkey off their back. They've proven they can go into a hostile environment and beat a traditionally strong team. And now Georgia's got to step up and show, it was just a few weeks ago, actually, Caleb, you asked this question earlier, kind of a crossroads game when Georgia went to Texas. We said this is a crossroads game. Texas is the new SEC. There's no way Georgia can go into Texas and beat number 1 Texas defense in the country and Steve Sarkisian, the brilliant mind, and not just 1 top 10 NIL quarterback, but 2. And Georgia played really well. So I kind of felt like their backs were to the wall there. This game, definitely, Tennessee has a chance to knock Georgia out and change the narrative. This could be, and I can't remember which one of there's many great journalists up there, but someone wrote program-changing win. If Tennessee goes into Georgia and knocks off Georgia, that is a program-changing win. And the talent fee, they could raise it again and get even more money, because now Josh has shown you what the direction this program is. I saw those facilities, man. I mean, you talk about an infusion of money and facilities and momentum. I think Danny White came outside yesterday. I saw him standing outside talking to a regular person. I mean, things are
he's
good
probably
there.
shaking that person down for money.
Why? I don't know about that, but
we need that damn talent fee.
I mean, get some more money, get some more players. I mean, Tennessee's got a ton of – this is a program-changing opportunity, Dave. I mean, this changes everything. If Tennessee wins this game, they're in the playoff. They could be they could win the SEC championship for the first time since 2001, playing the game for the first time since 2007, hand Kirby back-to-back losses for the first time since 2016, snap Georgia's 28-game home win streak, which is currently the longest in the nation. I mean, Tennessee is set up to blow up Georgia, but they got to win the game. If they lose the game, what's the narrative? So there's a lot at stake, and both of these teams have reason to believe that they can win the game, and then we can look at both of these teams and pick them apart and say, well, maybe not this team. I think it's a really evenly matched game, and, the old whoever plays better really applies to this one.
Mike, I didn't mean to keep you that long. Let me ask you this, though, real quickly. What's the closest this man ever came to death?
The closest I came to death.
Look at that paratrooper right there. I mean, the intensity, the guile, man, he's ready to just go out there and take somebody out.
Yeah, I was. That's how they brainwash you. But again, that was a long, long time ago. I'll tell you a funny story. I actually ran 2 miles in under 10 minutes once. This is true. The drill sergeant told me that if I didn't, he was going to send me home. I think these guys used to bet on us or something, because they would motivate you in ways that probably they shouldn't have. But I was convinced that if I didn't do it, and I just ran as fast as I could 8 times around the track. I mean, and it was everybody running, but they moved me and this guy from Chicago. They said, if you don't do this in under 10 minutes, and all I could imagine was the shame. Oh my gosh, I got kicked out of I was so scared. It was complete fear. So, I mean, but the truth of the matter is, Dave, and I know it's a fun spoof, and it is funny. It was a long time ago, but I
really respect it. I'm being dead serious.
I thank God for the opportunity, because I was graduating high school. I had no plan. I had no grades. I had no money. And going in the military gave me an opportunity to earn the GI Bill for college. It taught me a lot about motivation. It gave me an opportunity to serve my country and understand the sacrifices that people made to protect our way of life and our great country. And all you had to do was look at the flag, and that was reason enough. And that's all you needed. You were part of a bigger team, and you had to protect the civilians. Think about how they told it. They were civilian. We weren't. That meant we weren't. If people in the military were civilians, what were we? They would tell us, you're as expendable as a number 2 lead pencil, soldier. I could break you tomorrow and nobody cares. And you learned real fast that there was something a lot bigger to believe in and to fight for. And so I learned a lot about esprit de corps. And I'll tell you, Dave, it's kind of like when we did radio together. Every time I came in, I couldn't wait to serve at your side.
Mike, you're a great man. Thank you for your service this day after Veterans Day. Thank you for the breakdown. I know it's a busy week. We certainly appreciate it. And we'll continue to follow your work. You're on the Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. So the stuff you do is fantastic. Kudos.
I salute you, Dave. Thank you.
Look at that guy salute me. You know, salute me. All right. We appreciate it, Mike. Take care.
All right, man. Take care.
Mike Griffith, Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I didn't mean to keep him that long. He's just that darn good.